In the azure waters off the coast of Australia, a lone jet skier ventured into the open ocean, seeking adventure and adrenaline. It was a sunny afternoon in late November 2013 when Mark Jamieson decided to take his brand new jet ski out for a solitary spin off the shores of Perth. The adrenaline junkie had been eagerly anticipating this day for weeks, practically vibrating with excitement to test the limits of the powerful machine's capabilities on the open waters. Perth, the sun-drenched capital of Western Australia, was renowned for its pristine beaches and world-class surf breaks. The city's coastline stretched for miles, with crystal-clear waters that beckoned adventure seekers from around the globe. For Mark, who had recently turned 25, it was the perfect playground to indulge his thirst for thrills. As he secured the jet ski onto the trailer and hitched to his truck, Mark couldn't help but feel a buzz of anticipation. This wasn't his first rodeo for extreme water sports. He had been wakeboarding and skateboarding since his teens, but there was something about the raw, unbridled power of the jet ski that filled him with a childlike giddiness. The drive to Castaway Beach, a popular spot for water sports enthusiasts, felt like an eternity. Mark's fingers drummed impatiently against the steering wheel as he navigated the familiar streets. When he pulled into the buzzing parking lot, the sun was high overhead, casting a warm glow over the scene of families setting up for beach days and surfers waxing their boards. Mark wasted no time in unloading and prepping his jet ski. With a few deft motions, the vessel was freed from its trailer restraints and ready to be lowered into the welcoming embrace of the gentle surf. The powerful engine roared to life, sending a spray of salt water into the air and eliciting a few curious glances from nearby beachgoers. Without hesitation, Mark hopped aboard, his heart thundering with exhilaration. A wide grin split his tanned face as he twisted the throttle, and the jet ski surged forward, cutting through the waves with remarkable ease. He let out a whoop of pure joy, the salty air whipping against his face as he carved through the water. Mark stayed close to shore for a few minutes, getting a feel for the jet ski's responsiveness and power as he navigated the crowded nearshore waters teeming with swimmers and fellow thrill-seekers. But it wasn't long before the open ocean started calling to him, that vast, glittering expanse of blue that promised unlimited freedom and adventure. Unbeknownst to Mark, his antics had not gone unnoticed by a different kind of predator, lurking beneath the waves. A massive great white shark, drawn by the jet ski's engine vibrations, began tracking his movements with a hunter's precision. Its cold, black eyes locked onto the solitary human, identifying him as potential prey. But Mark was oblivious to the danger, lost in the euphoria of speed and adrenaline. With a mischievous grin, he pointed the jet ski's nose toward the open ocean and gunned the engine. The powerful vessel leaped forward, rapidly distancing Mark and the shoreline. Perth's beaches and high-rise buildings soon became mere specks on the horizon as he ventured farther and farther out to sea, chasing the limitless azure expanse. Mark felt utterly free, with water surrounding him in every direction. He executed daring maneuvers, sharp turns, and launched the jet ski into the air, only to come crashing back down onto the water's surface with a thunderous splash that sent spray flying. It was during one of these airborne stunts that disaster struck. As the jet ski reached the apex of its arc, the unmistakable shape of the great white shark breached the surface, its massive jaws agape and its cold black eyes fixated on Mark. Time seemed to slow as the shark, moving with a sudden burst of speed, collided with the jet ski in midair, its mighty jaws clamping down on the vessel's hull with a sickening crunch. The impact was catastrophic, the force sending Mark flying off the jet ski. He hit the water with bone-jarring force. The air explosively forced from his lungs as he was briefly enveloped in a world of churning foam and darkness, his senses overwhelmed by the violent collision. When Mark finally surfaced, gulping in precious lungfuls of air, his mind was a whirl of confusion and panic. Where was the jet ski, and what the hell had just happened? It was only when his gaze fell upon the mangled wreckage rapidly sinking below the waves that the terrifying reality hit him. He was stranded miles from shore with a threat he could scarcely comprehend lurking just beneath the surface. As if on cue, the massive form of the great white shark materialized beside the sinking jet ski, its substantial dorsal fin slicing through the water with lethal grace. Mark felt his blood run cold as its pale underbelly became visible, the great predator circling him with a slow, metronomic rhythm. The shark seemed to sense his fear, its predatory instincts kicking into high gear. It turned towards Mark, using its powerful tail to propel itself forward with terrifying speed. Though he kicked furiously, frantically trying to distance himself from the rapidly approaching threat, it was no use. The shark was closing in, its cavernous maw opening wide to reveal a row of serrated teeth. In that heart-stopping moment, every muscle in Mark's body burned with the fire of sheer desperation, as a primal will to survive took over. Just as the shark returned to strike, he flung his arm out in a wild defensive swipe, catching the side of its head with a glancing blow. The strike didn't do much damage, but was enough to startle and disorient the predator for a few vital seconds. Mark didn't waste a moment. He turned and began swimming with every ounce of strength he could muster, his powerful strokes propelling him through the water as he fled from the injured, enraged beast behind him. Already he could hear the sounds of its powerful tail thrashing, churning the water into a froth as it gave chase. His heart thundered in his ears, lungs burning from the exertion of his desperate flight. Try as he might to put as much distance between himself and the shark as possible, it seemed an impossible task. Its speed and tenacity were unrelenting, but Mark refused to give in to the creeping tendrils of despair. He was young, strong, and in the prime of his life. If anyone could outswim this nightmare, it was him. He swam relentlessly, his muscles burning with exhaustion, each breath searing through his lungs as if filled with molten lead. Only when he dared to glance backward did he fully grasp the magnitude of his danger. No more than 20 yards behind, the great white shark's unmistakable dorsal fin sliced through the water, its massive jaws gaping as it readied itself to surge forward and attack. A scream tore from Mark's throat, a primal sound of anguish and sheer horror. This was it. He could feel it in his bones. After outrunning the shark for so long, his luck finally ran out. He thrashed wildly in the water, blood pounding in his ears, mind consumed by blind panic as the shark closed the distance with terrifying speed. Then, just as the nightmare creature drew within striking range, jaws agape to secure its kill, a series of ear-splitting cracks rang out across the open water. Mark flinched, instinctively covering his head with his arms as something large and heavy passed before him, creating a towering wall of white water. He could scarcely believe what he saw when he opened his eyes, blinking away the stinging salt water. There, floating only a dozen yards away, was a large fishing boat, and sprawled out on its deck were two burly crewmen, smoke still wafting from the barrels of their rifles. One of them shouted to him to hang tight, already rushing to drop a life ring and safety ladder over the side of the boat. With a burst of adrenaline fueled by sheer relief, Mark propelled himself toward the rescuers. They quickly pulled him aboard, where he arrived coughing and sputtering but alive. The crew led him into the cramped cabin and wrapped him in warm blankets. Mark recounted his harrowing ordeal with the great white shark as they bombarded him with questions. He described how it had ambushed him and pursued him relentlessly for hours, a tale of survival that left everyone in awe. The crew members listened in grim silence as Mark recounted his ordeal, their weathered faces etched with awe and concern. Once he had finished, the captain wasted no time radioing for assistance and medical evacuation. Within the hour, the distant thump of helicopter rotors could be heard cutting through the salt-tinged air. As the rescue chopper drew near, lowering a harness to winch Mark aboard, he couldn't help but steal one last glance back toward the spot where the shark had vanished beneath the waves. A full-body shudder ran through him, thinking of how close he had come to becoming that legendary predator's next meal. By sheer luck and the bravery of those crewmen, he had been given a second chance at life. As the chopper banked over the glittering ocean, Mark silently vowed that this harrowing experience would serve as a wake-up call. No longer would he take unnecessary risks just for a cheap thrill. The ocean's fury, though awe-inspiring, demanded the utmost respect and humility from those who dared to venture into its domain. He would carry the physical and emotional scars of this day for the rest of his life, as a permanent reminder. It all began one summer afternoon when Alice, a bubbly and adventurous soul with an insatiable thirst for exploration, stumbled upon an old bookstore tucked away in a narrow alley. As she browsed the shelves filled with forgotten tales and faded memories, She stumbled upon a copy of a sea adventure novel from the 19th century. Intrigued by the promise of high seas adventure, she couldn't resist purchasing the book and delving into its pages. Little did she know, fate had a serendipitous encounter in store for her that day. Alice is a 23-year-old student at a university in America who looks older due to her weight. Alice proudly embraces her body, refusing to be defined by society's narrow beauty standards. But she always yearns to do something: swim. Despite her inability to swim, she finds solace and joy in spending time at the beach, basking in the sun's warmth and listening to the soothing rhythm of the waves. With each visit, she revels in the simple pleasures of the sand between her toes and the salty breeze caressing her skin. As she sat on a bench outside the bookstore, engrossed in the captain's captivating tale, she heard three people's loud voices as they conversed. These folks, which include two men of Alice's age and a lady, notice her, and aside from that, they see the book she is holding, and one exclaims in surprise since he'd been trying to get the book for a long time. There, he talked with Alice about where she got it, and she answered that it was the last one in the bookstore. He introduced himself as Kenneth and the other two as Jose and Donna. They were also students of the same university, albeit in different departments. What united them was the shared dream of spending time at the beach, reading and writing about the beauty of the water. So they formed a group to formalize their interest and attract more people with the same dream. When Alice commented about her interest in marine life, Kenneth quickly introduced her to the group, and she joined happily. They decided to continue their conversation over dinner at a nearby canteen, and their friendship blossomed from there. Over the following weeks and months, the group embarked on countless adventures. However, one of these adventures had a different impact on Alice and everyone at the beach during that time. The day started like any other as the group joined at the beach, where they had planned to go on a trip earlier. After several months with the team, they knew Alice couldn't swim because of her ample frame, so they put her through training and swimming lessons to help her overcome this. They got into the boat and sailed to a part of the ocean where the engine was shut off, and they took out what they brought to eat. Determined to prove that she could now swim, she watched the buoy bobbing in the distance and made a spontaneous decision. Alice announced that she was going to swim to that buoy. Her friends exchanged uncertain glances, but Alice was already stripping off her outer clothes, revealing her bikini, and she slipped into the water. The cold shock of the ocean enveloped her as she began to swim, her strokes determined but unsteady. As Alice navigated the waters, the currents tugged relentlessly against her. Her muscles strained against the resistance with each stroke, and doubts crept into her mind. But she pushed them aside, focusing on the buoy ahead and swimming back. Unbeknownst to Alice, her struggles had attracted an unexpected observer. Under the surface, a great white shark prowled, drawn by the ripples. Then suddenly she heard a scream from Kenneth and Donna, urging her to beware of the shark, and turned back quickly towards the boat. She turned towards them with her heart pounding in her chest, as she was scared of the incident. She glanced back towards the boat to see her friends frozen in place, their faces pale with dread. Panic threatened to overwhelm her, but she forced herself to keep moving, each stroke a battle against her doubts and the relentless pull of the currents. It would have been better if she had just entered the water. She had long swam away from the boat, and returning wasn't easy. As she tried swimming back, she felt a sudden tug at her leg. She gasped as she was yanked beneath the surface, the cold embrace of the ocean swallowing her whole. Amid the turmoil, Alice's mind whirred into action, seeking an escape. Recalling tales of sharks repelled by abrupt motions and loud sounds, she tapped into a burst of adrenaline. She kicked forcefully and exhaled sharply underwater, aiming to create bubbles and noise to scare the predator into loosening its grip. Miraculously, her strategy succeeded. The grip on her leg relaxed, and Alice propelled herself upwards with all her might, breaking through the water's surface to draw a desperate breath. However, her sense of victory was fleeting. Peering down, she spotted the ominous silhouette circling beneath her, patiently waiting. The incident left Alice shaken to her core. Her friends on the boat were equally horrified, their faces contorted with fear as they watched the drama unfold. Kenneth, Donna, and the others shouted words of encouragement, urging Alice to swim faster back to the boat's safety. Amidst the chaos of the struggle, Jose, who had been stupefied since the incident began, suddenly had a stroke of inspiration. He knew they had to act fast to save Alice from the looming threat of the shark circling below. Determined, he rallied Kenneth and Donna to his side, their faces grim with resolve as they prepared to mount a rescue mission. Without hesitation, they sprang into action, firing up the boat's engine and speeding towards Alice with all urgency. The engine's roar filled the air as they cut through the waves, their eyes fixed on the lone figure struggling in the water ahead. As they drew closer, Alice's heart leaped with hope as she saw the boat approaching. With renewed determination, she pushed herself to the limit, her muscles burning with exertion as she fought to reach the boat's safety before it was too late. With a final burst of effort, Alice reached out towards the outstretched hands of Kenneth and Donna, their faces etched with relief as they pulled her aboard with all the strength they could muster. As she collapsed onto the deck, gasping for air and trembling with exhaustion, she felt a wave of gratitude wash over her, knowing that she had narrowly escaped a brush with death thanks to the quick thinking and unwavering determination of her friends. As they sailed back to shore, the tension that had gripped them slowly began to ease, replaced by a sense of profound relief and gratitude for their miraculous escape. Alice huddled close to Kenneth, Donna, and Jose, their arms wrapped around her in a protective embrace as they navigated the waters. Despite the lingering fear and uncertainty in the air, there was also a palpable sense of camaraderie and solidarity forged in the crucible of shared danger and triumph. As they stepped onto the sandy shores of the beach once more, battered but unbroken, Alice couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude for the friends who had risked their lives to save her. At that moment, she knew their bond was more potent than any force of nature, forged in the crucible of shared danger and triumph. In 2013, the remote Isla del Coco, a national park located approximately 300 miles off the Pacific coast of Costa Rica, served as a protected marine sanctuary teeming with abundant sea life, including multiple species of sharks thriving in its temperate waters. The remote, uninhabited islands had been designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site due to their incredible biodiversity and efforts to protect the endangered Galapagos, white-tip reef and whale sharks that congregated there. A group of American tourists had booked an eco-tour to snorkel and scuba dive amid the vibrant coral reefs surrounding Isla del Coco. Among them was Calvin Davenport, a high school science teacher passionate about marine biology. On the second day of their excursion, the tourists were enjoying the warm waters in a relatively shallow inlet, enthralled by the schools of colorful fish darting between the swaying kelp fronds. But their tranquility was shattered when a deckhand on the dive boat began frantically waving and shouting for them to return to the ship immediately. Jeffrey Takata, the seasoned park ranger accompanying the tour, felt his blood run cold when the reason for the alarm became clear: cloudy trails of blood roiling up from the reef below. In a blind panic, the snorkelers thrashed towards the ladder, hauling themselves over the gunnels, but one tourist was not so fortunate. As the boat's crew pulled the last straggler, Claire O'Malley, onto the dive platform, they gasped in horror. Where her right leg had been was nothing but a frothing stump of torn flesh and protruding bone. An abnormally large great white shark, well over 15 feet long, had ambushed the woman, shearing off her limb with a catastrophic chomp before disappearing into the depths, potentially to counterattack. Thanks to the quick efforts of Calvin, who happened to be an experienced EMT, Claire was stabilized long enough to evacuate via helicopter to a hospital on the mainland. However, she would remain in intensive care, having lost over half her blood from the traumatic amputation. Jeffrey and the Park Service closed off part of the waters around Isla del Coco, as the massive rogue shark remained unaccounted for, potentially still lurking in the vicinity. They brought in Socorro Castillo, a renowned ichthyologist, to try and unravel the mystery behind the great white's extremely uncharacteristic hunting behavior. Great whites were present in moderate numbers in the marine sanctuary, but they rarely ventured into the shallow reef areas to hunt, preferring to cruise the deeper ocean outskirts. And an attack of such sizable proportions on a human was virtually unheard of, especially without being provoked. As Socorro analyzed environmental data collected by the research staff, a potential pattern emerged. Detectable levels of toxic runoff from agriculture and manufacturing on the mainland had appeared in the currents, particularly in the area where the attack occurred. She theorized that pollution and human activity may have driven the shark into a confused frenzy, causing it to view the swimmers as prey, rather than avoiding them as typical great white behavior dictates. If her hypothesis was correct, the great white could strike again at any moment, putting any human activity in the waters at extreme risk. Socorro urged Jeffrey and the rangers to evacuate personnel from the sanctuary until the rogue shark could be located and neutralized. However, the park warden bristled at the idea of closing off the sanctuary and interrupting their vital conservation and research operations for a prolonged period. He contended they had enough security measures to mitigate the risk while safely conducting their work. The tension came to a head when the rogue great white savagely killed a park ranger conducting underwater surveys. Jolted by this latest fatality, Jeffrey authorized a full-scale hunt to eradicate the threat once and for all, looking to Socorro for guidance. She warned eliminating the great white would be daunting and futile if the core issues of contamination and human disturbance weren't addressed. But she realized Jeffrey's duty was protecting human life. Steeling themselves, the pair embarked on an unorthodox hunt, using every tactic to interact with the predator in its territory. After several close calls, they realized the only solution was capturing the great white alive and relocating it to an isolated sanctuary away from humans. Though immensely challenging, it was a chance to preserve the fragile balance between species and humble humanity's role in the undersea realm. With persistence and daring, they eventually succeeded, restoring safety to the marine paradise through their courageous actions. In the aftermath, strict environmental regulations were enacted to curtail toxic runoff near the marine sanctuary. Jeffrey and Socorro's harrowing ordeal also fostered greater awareness of the need to respect the natural habitats of apex predators like great whites. The sanctuary flourished as an ecological wonder, a powerful reminder of the importance of conservation and coexistence with nature's most awe-inspiring creatures. The ocean stretched out before them, a vast expanse of blue as far as the eye could see. Nathan and Victoria stood on the ship's deck, their hearts pounding excitedly as they prepared for their long-awaited shark cage dive. They had dreamed of this moment for weeks, imagining the thrill of coming face-to-face with one of the ocean's most feared predators. As they donned their wetsuits and checked their diving equipment, both shared nervous glances, their excitement tinged with a hint of apprehension. They had both heard the stories, the tales of divers who had ventured into the depths only never to return. But they pushed aside their doubts, determined to conquer their fears and experience the wonders beneath the surface. With the cage secured to the side of the boat, they both descended into the water, their anticipation building with each passing moment. The cool embrace of the ocean enveloped them, a welcome relief from the oppressive day's stifling heat. They adjusted their masks and regulators, their breath coming in short, shallow gasps as they prepared to enter the shark-infested waters below. Nathan and Victoria's excitement reached a fever pitch as the cage descended into the depths. They peered through the bars, their eyes scanning the depths for movement. They put out bait to attract the sharks in the water and wait for the creatures to keep coming. And then, suddenly, they saw what they wanted to see. It was a dark shape gliding effortlessly through the water. With a rush of adrenaline, Nathan moved closer to Victoria's side, and together they watched in awe as the shark came closer, its cold black eyes fixed on them with predatory intent. Fear mingled with excitement as they marveled at the sheer power and grace of the creature before them. This was what they had come for, to experience the raw beauty and danger of the ocean in all its glory. But then, without warning, disaster struck. You might expect a different one. A sudden storm descended upon the ocean, lashing the surface with ferocious winds and towering waves. The vessel rocked violently in the churning waters, its hull creaking and groaning under the strain. As Nathan and Victoria watched in horror, they realized they were trapped in the cage at the mercy of the above storm. Panic surged through them as they clung to the cage's bars, their hearts pounding in their chests. With each passing moment, the storm grew more intense, threatening to tear the cage from its moorings and cast it adrift in the unforgiving depths below. And as they looked out at the roiling waters, they knew their situation was dire. Then, as suddenly as it started, the storm stopped. They've become distraught with this storm, so they only want to escape the shark cage. However, they discover something shocking. It refused to work when they pressed the cage winch system that would automatically take them back to the vessel. After several acts, they discovered it had been damaged. They tried to shake the chain to alert those agents on the boat, but they got no response. With their air supplies dwindling and no hope of rescue, Nathan and Victoria knew they had to act fast. Drawing on their training and experience, they began to assess the damage to the cage, searching for any signs of weakness or compromise, and a way to get out of the cage before they died. With each passing minute, Nathan and Victoria felt the weight of their predicament pressing down on them, but they refused to succumb to despair, determined to find a way out of their dire situation. But as they worked, they discovered they had to deal with another serious issue. The sharks continued to circle, their dark forms looming ever closer in the depths. They could feel the creatures' predatory gaze upon them with each pass, their cold, lifeless eyes filled with hunger and malice. And as the minutes ticked by, they knew they were running out of time. Those sharks were coming for their bait before the storm, so they returned with full force. A slam at the cage disoriented them, and the winch they had been trying to resolve returned to square one. After several minutes of banging the cage, the bars began to dent. Later, the sharks retreated after they'd consumed the bait and could attack only iron bars. Nathan and Victoria still consider it a miracle that their oxygen wasn't exhausted during the clashes. Nathan tried to force one of the bars big enough for them to escape, but it wasn't easy. Luckily, the agents on top of the vessel had timed their trip, so they decided to pull up the cage after they'd waited a while for Nathan and Victoria to activate the winch system. But they didn't. And then, with a low, ominous groan, the cage began to ascend, its metal frame creaking and groaning under the strain. With each passing moment, Nathan and Victoria held their breath, their eyes fixed on the surface above as they prayed for deliverance from the depths below. And then, finally, after what felt like an eternity, they breached the surface, quickly removed their mask, and gasped for breath as they gulped in the sweet, life-giving air. With tears of relief streaming down their faces, they clung to each other, their hearts overflowing with gratitude for their miraculous escape from the jaws of death. As they looked out at the storm-tossed sea, they knew they would never forget the terror of that fateful day when a simple shark cage dive had turned into a fight for survival against the ocean's fury. It was the cool summer of 2014 when a team of experienced divers set their sights on the remote Palau Trench, a deep-sea trench located off the coast of the tiny Pacific island nation of Palau. For years, rumors had swirled about a sunken treasure ship, its hold brimming with priceless artifacts from a bygone era, lost to this mysterious underwater chasm. Calista Mendoza, a seasoned treasure hunter with a reputation for fearlessness and an insatiable thirst for adventure, led the expedition. Her crew consisted of Alejandro Torres, a former naval officer with extensive diving experience, and the siblings Marissa and Javier Ramirez, both skilled technical divers with a passion for underwater exploration. As their research vessel, the Azul Profundo cut through the vast waters of the Pacific, excitement crackled in the air like static electricity. Calista pored over the faded charts and ancient texts that had guided them to this remote location, her eyes alight with the promise of uncovering a long-lost treasure. She declared that that was it, her voice tinged with a reverence bordering on obsession. It was the resting place of the Dorada del Mar, a Spanish galleon laden with gold and artifacts beyond our wildest dreams. Alejandro, ever the pragmatist, arched an eyebrow skeptically. He confirmed if Caliste was certain the coordinates were accurate because they were venturing into uncharted territory there. Calista shot him a withering glance, asking if she had ever steered them wrong. She let the question hang in the air, her conviction unwavering. The crew made final preparations as the Azul Profundo neared the designated coordinates. Scuba tanks were checked, rebreathers were calibrated, and diving slates were handed out, each bearing an intricate map to guide them to their underwater destination. With a collective intake of breath, the divers submerged into the inky depths, their powerful dive lights cutting through the perpetual gloom that enveloped the trench. The descent was slow and methodical, each diver monitoring their air consumption and depth with practiced precision. A sense of awe washed over them as they neared the bottom of the trench. The seabed was littered with the remnants of shipwrecks, their once proud hulls reduced to ghostly skeletons by the relentless passage of time. Ancient amphorae and weathered artifacts peeked through the silt, tantalizing glimpses of the treasures that might lay in wait. Callista signaled for the team to regroup, her eyes shining with excitement. Using her slate, she traced the path they would need to follow, the map leading them deeper into the heart of the trench. The journey was arduous, with the divers navigating treacherous terrain and through labyrinthine coral and rock formations. But their perseverance was rewarded when Javier's light illuminated a sight that caused their hearts to skip a beat. Half buried in the silt lay the unmistakable outline of a ship's hull, its timbers warped and encrusted with centuries of marine growth. Callista's eyes widened as she took in the intricate carvings that adorned the stern, a telltale sign that they had indeed stumbled upon the legendary Dorada del Mar. Adrenaline coursing through their veins, the team set about carefully excavating the site, their movements precise and respectful as they uncovered the ship's secrets. Javier and Marissa worked in tandem, brushing away layers of silt to reveal the glint of gold and the shimmer of precious gemstones. Alejandro, his military training kicking in, kept a watchful eye on their surroundings, his gaze constantly sweeping the inky depths for any potential threats. It was this vigilance that alerted him to the first sign of danger. Then a massive shadow, darker than the surrounding gloom, emerged from the murky depths, its curved form cutting through the water with lethal grace. Alejandro's blood ran cold as he recognized the unmistakable silhouette of a great white shark, its fearsome jaws agape and its beady eyes fixed on the diving team. Alejandro alerted the others with a frantic series of hand signals to the impending threat. Callista, her face set in grim determination, signaled for them to continue their excavation, unwilling to abandon their hard-won prize. The shark circled closer, its powerful tail propelling it through the water with terrifying speed. Marissa watched in horror as the predator's jaws snapped shut mere inches from her face, the rush of displaced water sending her tumbling backward. Javier, his protective instincts kicking in, positioned himself between his sister and the shark. His eyes narrowed in defiance. But even his bravery paled in the face of the ocean's apex predator, its primordial hunger driving it closer to the team. As the minutes ticked by, tension mounted, each diver acutely aware of their dwindling air supply and the looming threat of the great white. Callista's face was a mask of concentration as she carefully extracted an ornate golden chalice from the wreckage, her movements slow and deliberate. But the shark's predatory senses, heightened by the scent of blood from a minor cut on Marissa's hand, seemed to grow more agitated with each passing second. Its circling tightened, its powerful tail thrashing the water into a furious maelstrom. Alejandro knew they were running out of time. With a series of urgent hand signals, he conveyed the gravity of the situation to Callista. Her face twisted in anguish, torn between the lure of the treasure and the preservation of her crew's safety. In the end, self-preservation won out. With a heavy heart, Callista signaled for the team to begin their ascent, clutching the golden chalice to her chest as they kicked towards the surface, their movements fueled by desperation. The great white, sensing its prey slipping away, surged forward with terrifying speed, its jaws snapping shut mere inches from Javier's fin. The young diver propelled himself upwards with a burst of adrenaline-fueled strength, his heart pounding in his ears. The ascent felt like an eternity, each diver painfully aware of their rapidly depleting air supply and the relentless pursuit of the shark. Marissa's eyes widened in horror as the predator closed in on her brother, its jaws agape and its powerful body coiled to strike. Alejandro interposed himself between the shark and Javier in a moment of selfless bravery, brandishing a titanium dive knife in a desperate bid to fend off the attack. The undeterred shark surged forward, its massive bulk slamming into Alejandro with the force of a freight train. The impact sent the former naval officer tumbling through the water, his air supply momentarily cut off as the shark's thrashing tail clipped his regulator. For a few agonizing seconds, he flailed helplessly, his lungs burning for oxygen. Javier, acting on pure instinct, grabbed Alejandro's arm and hauled him towards the surface, his powerful kicks propelling them both upwards with renewed urgency. Marissa and Callista followed close behind, their faces etched with fear and determination. Finally, after an eternity, they breached the surface, their gasping breaths filling the air with a symphony of relief. The great white denied its prey circled menacingly beneath them, its dorsal fin cutting through the water like a razor's edge. As the Azul Profundo's crew hauled them on board, the divers collapsed onto the deck, their bodies trembling with the lingering adrenaline rush of their harrowing encounter. Alejandro, his face pale and his eyes haunted, clutched the titanium dive knife that had saved his life, its blade bent and scarred from the shark's powerful jaws. Later on, the team found themselves grappling with the aftermath of their brush with death. As for the legendary Dorada del Mar, its secrets would remain largely undisturbed, save for the ornate golden chalice that now resided in a museum, a silent testament to the perils and wonders that awaited those daring enough to venture into the depths unknown. The underwater treasure hunt had been a harsh reminder of the fragility of life and the unforgiving nature of the ocean's depths. For the divers, it had been a baptism by fire, a crucible that had forged them into wiser, more cautious explorers of the underwater realm. As they looked back on that fateful expedition, they couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude, not for the treasure they had recovered, but for the ultimate prize, their lives, snatched from the jaws of death by sheer force of will, and the unbreakable bonds of friendship and camaraderie. In the age of social media, where likes and views reign supreme, some will go to any lengths to capture the perfect shot. Among them was Joan Mitchell, a thrill-seeking influencer with a penchant for pushing the boundaries of adventure. With her camera in hand and her sights set on fame and fortune, she can plan audacious stunts just to capture the attention of her followers. That's what she did when she made an illegal dive into a restricted area known for its shark activity. Gathering a group of like-minded adventurers, Joan embarked on her quest for the ultimate thrill. With promises of fame and fortune swirling in their heads, they eagerly followed her lead, their hearts pounding with anticipation as they ventured into the unknown depths of the ocean. As they descended into the waters, the ethereal beauty of the underwater world unfolded before them, captivating their senses with its otherworldly allure. Despite the inherent dangers lurking below, Joan and her companions reveled in the exhilaration of their surroundings, their adrenaline-fueled excitement propelling them forward in search of the perfect shot. With each passing moment, they captured the essence of their adventure, filming themselves as they swam amongst the vibrant coral reefs and darting schools of fish. Joan, in particular, took center stage, her charisma and fearlessness shining through as she backstroked gracefully through the water, her camera capturing every moment of her daring escapade. But their idyllic underwater expedition took a terrifying turn when Taylor, one of Joan's companions, suddenly shouted a warning. With a sinking feeling in her stomach, Joan turned to see what had prompted Taylor's alarm, only to face a scene straight out of a nightmare, a shark-feeding frenzy in full swing. However, Joan's determination was unwavering as she edged closer to the feeding frenzy, despite the frantic warnings from her crewmates. Their voices, tinged with urgency, echoed in her ears, but she remained resolute, driven by an insatiable curiosity to witness the spectacle up close. As she inched closer, the atmosphere crackled with tension, her companions' panic escalating with each passing moment. Their cameras rolled, capturing the impending danger looming ever closer. Despite their distance, the fear was palpable, their hearts pounding in sync with the rhythm of the ocean waves. Recognizing the imminent peril, Taylor tried to intervene, knowing time was of the essence. But Joan pressed on, seemingly oblivious to the danger that surrounded her. Just as Taylor prepared to call out a final warning, disaster struck with swift and savage force. A sudden surge and Joan's piercing yell pierced the air as one of the sharks lunged, sinking its teeth into her flesh. The struggle was frantic, a desperate battle for survival as Joan fought to break free from the jaws of death. With the rest of the crew rushing to her aid, their shouts mingled with the crashing waves as they fought to pry her from the shark's grip. With a collective effort, they managed to wrench Joan free, leaving her body limp and bloodied as they hauled her back toward the safety of the boat. They counted every second as they raced against time, knowing Joan's blood could attract even more predators. But amidst the chaos and the pain, Joan's lips curled into a serene smile, and her eyes were alight with an unexpected sense of contentment. When her companions questioned her about the source of her inexplicable joy, She simply gestured towards the camera, a glimmer of pride shining through the haze of agony. For Joan, the harrowing ordeal had not been in vain. Her unwavering determination had captured the raw essence of survival, immortalizing the moment for the world to witness. After being swiftly transported to the hospital, Joan underwent surgery to mend the deep gash left by the shark's bite. The doctors worked diligently, stitching up the wound with precision and administering a course of antibiotics to prevent infection. Though the injury would likely leave a scar, Joan was fortunate that the outcome wasn't more severe. Despite the ordeal, Joan found a silver lining in the form of the photograph she managed to capture. The image froze the heart-stopping moment the shark's jaws clamped down, preserving it for eternity. With relief and pride, she shared the photo and accompanying video on her social media accounts a week later. To her astonishment, the response was overwhelming. Within hours, the post had garnered thousands of likes, shares, and comments from around the globe. Joan's story spread like wildfire, capturing the attention of media outlets far and wide. Before she knew it, Joan was thrust into the spotlight, her newfound fame eclipsing anything she had ever imagined. She appeared on talk shows, podcasts, and interviews, recounting the gripping tale of survival that had captured the imagination of millions. It was the summer of 2018 in the small coastal town of Donsol, Philippines. The quaint village was nestled between lush green hills and the shimmering azure waters of the Pacific Ocean. For generations, the locals had coexisted harmoniously with the diverse marine life in the area's rich ecosystem. However, a group of eco-tourists was about to experience a terrifying ordeal that would shatter the tranquil facade of this seaside paradise. Quintin Delgado, a renowned marine biologist, organized the tour to raise awareness about preserving the delicate balance of the local marine environment. Among the participants were Zarina Villanueva, a passionate environmentalist, and her husband, Javier Reyes, an amateur photographer eager to capture the wonders of the underwater world. The tour group boarded the Casiana, a sturdy yet weathered fishing vessel captained by the grizzled local Thomas Alvarez. His first mate, the young and energetic Maricel Santos, ensured all safety protocols were in place. The plan was to embark on a diving expedition to observe the magnificent whale sharks that frequented the waters off the coast of Donsol. As the Casiana set sail, the tourists' excited chatter filled the air. Quintin briefed them on the importance of maintaining a respectful distance from the gentle giants, emphasizing that their presence should not disrupt the sharks' natural behavior. With their diving gear in order and anticipation brewing, the group eagerly awaited their first encounter with the majestic creatures. After an hour, Tomas skillfully maneuvered the boat to a spot renowned for whale shark sightings. The crystal-clear waters offered excellent visibility, and the tourists eagerly donned their diving gear. One by one, they slipped beneath the surface, their eyes wide with wonder as they caught their first glimpses of the massive spotted sharks gliding gracefully through the azure expanse. For a while, the experience was nothing short of breathtaking. The whale sharks, seemingly unperturbed by the divers' presence, continued their serene dance through the vibrant coral gardens. Her heart swelling with joy, Zarina gestured excitedly to Javier, who eagerly snapped away with his camera, capturing the majestic creatures in their natural habitat. However, their blissful reverie was shattered when a sudden jarring noise reverberated through the water. The anchored Casiana had drifted dangerously close to a treacherous reef, and the anchor chain had become entangled in the sharp coral formations. Tomas and Maricel, realizing the gravity of the situation, immediately signaled for the divers to resurface. As the group hastily ascended, a sense of unease settled over them. The commotion caused by the struggling vessel had attracted the attention of a different kind of shark, one far more menacing than the gentle whale sharks they had been observing. Quintin's experienced eye immediately recognized the telltale silhouettes of oceanic white-tip sharks, their sleek bodies cutting through the water with predatory grace. These apex predators, known for their aggressive nature, had likely been drawn to the area by the thrashing of the anchor chain and the disturbance it had caused. With the divers safely back on board, Tomas and Maricel worked feverishly to free the anchor, their efforts punctuated by the ominous circling of the white-tip sharks. The tourists huddled together, their hearts pounding as they watched the sharks increasingly agitated by the ongoing disturbance. Zarina clutched Javier's hand, her knuckles turning white with fear. She whispered to Javier, her voice trembling. Quentin, his brow furrowed with concern, addressed the group. He urged them to remain calm. These sharks were highly territorial and had been drawn to the area by the noise and movement. Their best course of action was to stay as still and quiet as possible until they could free the anchor and get the boat moving again. It was easier said than done as the sharks circling grew tighter and more menacing with each passing minute. The tourists could feel the tension in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. Tomas and Maricel redoubled their efforts, their muscles straining against the stubborn anchor chain. Finally, with a tremendous heave, the anchor broke free, and the Cassiana lurched forward, propelled by the powerful currents. Relief washed over the group as the white-tip sharks fell behind, their interest waning as the disturbance subsided. However, their respite was short-lived. The propeller churned the waters as the Cassiana gained speed, kicking up a heated trail of bubbles and vibrations. To the sharks, this new disturbance was an irresistible lure, and they gave chase, their sleek bodies cutting through the water with terrifying speed. The tourists watched in horror as the first white-tip shark closed in, its mighty jaws snapping mere feet away from the stern of the boat. Maricel uttered a terrified shriek, her hands flying to her mouth in shock. Quentin, his mind racing, turned to Thomas. He urged Thomas that they needed to cut the engine and let the current carry them away from the sharks. The vibrations and noise only attracted them further. Tomas nodded grimly, his weathered face etched with concern. He killed the engine, and the Cassiana drifted silently. The only sound, the gentle lapping of waves against the hull. For a moment it seemed as though the plan had worked. The sharks fell back, their interest seemingly waning. But then, one particularly bold white-tip surged forward, its mighty jaws clamping down on the wooden gunwale, splintering the wood with a sickening crunch. The tourists recoiled in terror, their screams piercing the air. Javier, his camera forgotten, clutched Zarina protectively to his chest, his eyes wide with fear. Quentin, his heart pounding, knew they had to act quickly. They needed a diversion to draw the sharks away from the boat. Without hesitation, the grizzled captain grabbed the bucket of fish guts and began tossing handfuls into the water, creating a trail that led away from the boat. The sharks, their predatory instincts piqued, immediately gave chase, their sleek bodies disappearing into the depths in pursuit of the tantalizing scent. For a brief moment, the group breathed a collective sigh of relief. However, their respite was short-lived. As the last chum dissipated, the sharks began to circle back, their hunger unsated. This time, they were joined by even more white-tips, drawn to the area by the promise of an easy meal. The tourists huddled together, their faces etched with fear as the sharks closed in again. Tomas was already working on the ignition. The engine sputtered and the Cassiana lurched forward, cutting through the water with renewed speed. Time seemed to slow as one of the shark's gaping maw descended, its razor-sharp teeth glinting in the sunlight. Maricel screamed, her hands flying to her face in terror. But at the last moment, a stroke of luck intervened. The shark's trajectory was slightly off, and instead of clamping down on the boat, its jaws closed around the trailing anchor chain. The shark thrashed violently, its powerful body twisting and writhing as it struggled to free itself from the unyielding metal links. The Cassiana surged forward, putting distance between itself and the enraged shark. As the minutes ticked by, the white tips gradually fell behind, their interest waning as the boat reached the safety of the shallower waters near the shore. The tourists disembarked on shaky legs, their faces ashen, and their bodies trembling from the harrowing ordeal they had just endured. Zarina clung to Javier, her eyes wide and haunted, while Quentin and the rest of the group huddled together, drawing strength from their shared survival. Tomas finally broke the silence, his gruff voice tinged with relief. He chuckled, though his laughter held a nervous edge as he claimed the ordeal was close. Quentin nodded solemnly, his brow furrowed with concern, and murmured that they were fortunate to make it back in one piece. Maricel, still visibly shaken, let out a shuddering breath. She whispered that she had never seen anything like that, as the sharks were relentless. As the group made their way back to the safety of the shore, they couldn't help but reflect on the fragile balance between humans and the mighty predators of the sea. What had begun as an innocent eco-tour, a chance to observe the majesty of nature up close, had quickly devolved into a life-or-death struggle against the very creatures they had come to admire. As they went their separate ways, each carrying the scars of their ordeal, they knew they would never again look at the sea with the same sense of wonder and innocence. The eco-tour had gone wrong, but in the process, they gained a newfound respect for the delicate balance between humans and the ancient predators that called the ocean their domain. Parasail swelled like a giant rainbow-colored jellyfish, carrying Ethan, Anya, and Lucas high above the sparkling waters surrounding Isla Flores in the Bahamas. It was November 15, 2007, and the vibrant coral reefs shimmered through the turquoise depths, teeming with colorful fish. This was their dream vacation, a break from the pressures of university life, a chance to soak up the sun and create memories that would last a lifetime. Ethan, the cautious planner of the group, was finally starting to relax. The gentle sway of the parasail and the salty ocean breeze had replaced his usual worries about deadlines and presentations. Anya, his free-spirited girlfriend, was a whirlwind of energy even hundreds of feet above the water, pointing excitedly at a pod of dolphins in the distance. Lucas, ordinarily shy and absorbed in his science fiction novels, laughed out loud, his usual sarcasm replaced by a sense of childlike wonder. The Caribbean was known for its diverse marine life. While sharks were present in these waters, the waters around Isla Flores were considered relatively safe, with most shark species being smaller and non-threatening. The friends, caught up in their vacation excitement, barely gave it a second thought. Their laughter bounced off the ocean surface, carried by the gentle breeze towards the boat towing them. Their carefree mood was contagious, infecting the stern-faced boat captain with a reluctant smile. This was the picture-perfect tropical escape they had all desperately needed. Ethan felt unease as the boat circled a particularly stunning section of the reef on this sunny November afternoon. The water below was deeper, losing its vibrant turquoise hue and turning to a darker blue. He knew sharks often preferred deeper water, and a familiar sense of caution crept back in. He glanced at Anya and Lucas, wondering if he should voice his concern, but they were lost in the moment's joy. Oblivious to Ethan's worry, Anya leaned over the edge of the harness, trying to get a better look at what lay below. Lucas was describing his latest video game idea, gesturing animatedly. Just then, Ethan noticed an enormous shadow pass beneath their parasail. A chill went down his spine. This was no ordinary fish. This was something far more extensive and more menacing. He tried to shout a warning, but it was too late. A massive great white shark, far more giant than any they would have expected this close to shore, erupted from the water, its jaws reaching towards them with horrifying speed. The boat captain yelled in alarm, realizing the danger in a split second. Time seemed to shatter as the shark's teeth slashed through the parasail's lines with jarring force. Ethan, Anya, and Lucas were thrown into the air. Their screams were lost against the rush of the wind as their makeshift parachute collapsed around them. In the chaos of the fall, they tumbled, limbs flailing, desperate for something to grab onto. The impact as they hit the water was brutal. Lucas felt a sharp pain in his shoulder as his body slammed against the surface. Ethan choked as the icy water filled his lungs, shocking him into a desperate fight for survival. Anya surfaced only to be dragged down again by the remnants of the parasail, her limbs tangling in the lines. The shark circled in the churning water, the frenzy of the attack momentarily disorienting it. Ethan, gasping for breath, thrashed wildly, trying to keep his head above the surface. He saw Lucas, face pale, trying to untangle himself from ropes and fabric that clung to him with deadly force. For a horrifying moment, Anya disappeared from view, submerged beneath the mess of the deflated parasail. Panic threatened to consume Ethan. Then, fueled by sheer adrenaline, he swam frantically towards Lucas, the silhouette of the shark a constant menacing presence nearby. With strength he didn't know he possessed, he helped Lucas haul himself free of the tangled lines, the water around them swirling red with Lucas's blood. Suddenly, Anya resurfaced, coughing and sputtering. Ethan and Lucas lunged for her, dragging her away from the wreckage. The shark closed in, seemingly recovering its focus, drawn by the commotion and the scent of blood. The boat captain wasn't going to abandon them without a fight. With frantic maneuvering, he positioned the small craft between them and the predator. He yelled at them to try and get on board, his voice a lifeline in the chaos. Kicking desperately, they made their way towards the boat's safety. Each second felt like an eternity, every splash inviting another attack. As Anya's hand finally grasped the railing, a sense of relief washed over Ethan. Yet his heart sank as he realized Lucas wasn't with them. Frantic, he searched the water, seeing his friend struggling several yards from the boat. Lucas's injured shoulder made it impossible for him to swim strongly, and the current started pulling him away. The shark, sensing weakness, cruised closer, its movements chillingly predatory. Ethan knew he had a split-second decision to make. He could haul himself onto the boat's safety or risk everything to save his friend. He didn't hesitate. Kicking off his sandals, he dove back into the water, the fear a knot in his stomach. The shark, momentarily distracted by a school of panicked fish, hadn't noticed Ethan's bold re-entry. With agonizing strokes, Ethan pushed his way towards Lucas, who was now shouting with terror. As the shark turned, realizing its prey was still within reach, Ethan closed the final distance to Lucas and shoved him bodily towards the boat. A searing pain ripped through his leg as the shark, in a confusing swirl of teeth and foam, lashed out at him. With a surge of desperate strength, Anya and the boat captain pulled them both on board in the nick of time as the shark circled back frustrated. On the boat, chaos reigned. Lucas was sobbing, cradling his injured shoulder, while Anya tried to assess the ragged wound on Ethan's calf. The rest of the journey back to the resort was a blur. Aligned by the Mayday call, Coast Guard vessels met them near the shore. Ethan was rushed to the small island clinic, the pain in his leg a constant burning reminder of how close they all had come to death. The gashes needed stitches, but his injury was minor compared to what might have been. The attack was all anyone on Isla Flores could talk about for weeks. The image of the monstrous shark haunted Ethan's nightmares, and the ocean, once his favorite place, seemed to hold a dark secret. Life on the island would never be quite the same. The tropical paradise forever tainted with the knowledge of the predators lurking in the waters below. The salty spray kissed Emily Dubois' cheeks as she leaned over the boat's railing, the azure expanse of the French Riviera stretching out before her like a painter's canvas. Today, June 12, 2004, marked their 5th wedding anniversary, and the air thrummed with the unspoken promise of an afternoon filled with laughter and joy. Thomas Fournier, her ever-patient architect husband, stood beside her, his usually meticulous hair tousled by the playful breeze. Earlier that morning, Emily surprised Thomas with a picnic basket overflowing with crusty baguettes, creamy brie, and a chilled rose. They had driven down from their Parisian apartment, leaving behind the city's relentless hum for the charming coastal town, nestled snugly against the sapphire waters. The day had unfolded like a dream, strolling hand in hand along the cobbled streets, stopping to admire the vibrant displays of fresh produce at the local market, and culminating in a shared laughter-filled lunch under the shade of a sprawling fig tree. Now, as the boat sliced through the crystal-clear water, Emily excitedly pointed out landmarks to Thomas, the iconic red-roofed houses clinging precariously to cliffs, the bobbing sailboats like white butterflies flitting across the surface, and the distant silhouette of a medieval castle perched on a rocky outcrop. A sense of carefree exhilaration bubbled within her. Suddenly, Thomas nudged her and gestured towards a group clustered around a booth displaying colorful parasail rides. Emily's eyes lit up. While parasailing wasn't exactly Thomas's cup of tea, he preferred the solid ground beneath his feet. He knew how much Emily loved the thrill of a new experience. With a playful grin, he suggested they give it a go. A surprise for her part of the day's adventure. They were harnessing themselves into the gadget, and a wave of nervous excitement washed over Emily as the boat pulled away. The parasail billowed above them like a giant, vibrantly colored jellyfish. The world shrunk below them as they ascended, the quaint towns along the Côte d'Azur now resembling a child's intricate building block city. The gentle breeze and the rhythmic tug of the tow line lulled them into a sense of contentment. Then, as Emily traced the shoreline with her finger, a flicker of movement in the water below caught her eye. A large, elongated shadow passed beneath them, momentarily blocking the sunlight filtering through the crystal-clear water. A playful joke about a playful whale escaped her lips, but a sliver of unease lodged in her stomach. The shadow circled back, growing larger with each rotation. Her heart pounded in her chest as the unmistakable outline of a great white shark came into focus, its sleek, menacing form shattering the idyllic serenity of the moment. The boat captain's initial shouts of alarm felt muffled against the roar of the ocean and the blood pounding in Emily's ears. Thomas's grip on her hand tightened, his face stark white. The shark ascended rapidly, its eyes seeming to fixate on their vulnerable position with chilling intelligence. With a burst of speed that belied its size, the massive predator lunged toward them, its jaws gaping open in a terrifying display of power. The flimsy fabric of the parasail was no match for its teeth, which tore through the material like tissue paper. Emily and Thomas were sent crashing downwards in a chaotic flurry of snapping lines and shrieking fabric. The impact as they hit the water was brutal. Emily gasped, icy water filling her lungs and blinding her. The remnants of the parasail tangled around her limbs, dragging her further below the surface. She kicked frantically, her instinct to survive, battling against the overwhelming panic. Finally breaking free, she gasped for air, her lungs burning, her heart thundering in her chest. Thomas resurfaced beside her, coughing and sputtering. They exchanged a desperate glance, searching for any sign of the shark. For an agonizing moment, the water around them seemed deceptively calm. Then the massive form reappeared, circling a chilling promise of another attack. The boat was closing in, but with horrifying speed, the shark headed directly for Emily. Just as she braced herself for the impact, it veered away, and she felt a searing pain erupt in her leg. A rush of water muffled her scream as she was briefly pulled beneath the surface again. Then strong hands hoisted her upward, hauling her unceremoniously back onto the crowded boat. Sobbing, she collapsed on the rough wooden floor, her gaze fixed on Thomas, who was still struggling against the shark's relentless circling. The captain maneuvered the craft between them, creating a temporary barrier against the massive predator. Thomas reached out desperately as the crew pulled him on board, his face a mask of terror. On the cramped deck, Emily realized with horror the extent of the damage to her leg. Blood stained the seawater, and the ragged gashes were a terrifying testament to the shark's power. Rough hands applied pressure to the wound. Harsh shouts blended with the insistent thrum of the boat's motor and the swirling chaos in her mind as they raced toward shore. Once back on land, a blur of activity followed. Frantic calls to emergency services, the arrival of paramedics, the sting of antiseptics. It all faded into a haze against the overwhelming pain and fear that consumed Emily. Her vision blurred as they loaded her into the ambulance, Thomas's worried face disappearing into the distance. In the stark, fluorescent lights of the hospital, the news came as a further blow. While Emily would recover, the damage to her leg would require a long and painful rehabilitation. The physical scars would forever be linked to the emotional wounds of that day. Emily tentatively dipped her toes back into activities she once loved, but there was a hesitancy now, a wariness about the natural world that couldn't be easily erased. The beach, once her favorite sanctuary, became a place of unease. Still, a deep-seated determination pushed her forward. She refused to let the fear control her life entirely. The attack on the French Riviera became a cautionary tale whispered among the seaside towns. Emily and Thomas bore the visible and invisible scars of their encounter with the predator. They had stared into the abyss and survived. The parasail bloomed against the impossibly clear sky of the Aitutaki Islands in the Cook Islands, carrying Natalia Perez, Ben Carter, and Zara Patel like a collection of colorful wind-borne flowers. Beneath them stretched the impossibly idyllic islands, a cluster of paradise nestled in the heart of the South Pacific. This was the final stop on their grand backpacking adventure, a chance to experience untouched beauty before their return to the real world of deadlines and routines on this sunny July 17, 2003. Natalia, a restless adventurer with a contagious grin, was the instigator of the trip. She thrived on new experiences, pushing her limits and dragging her friends along. Ben, a cautious history buff, had reluctantly found himself caught up in Natalia's whirlwind, secretly grateful for the break from his dusty library books. Zara, a gentle soul passionate about photography, added a touch of serenity to their trio. The postcard-perfect Aitutaki Islands seemed like the safest place on Earth. The friendly locals, with their sun-kissed smiles and relaxed demeanor, reassured them that the waters were free from any significant predators. Still, stories of the legendary great white known as the Leviathan were whispered by the island elders as cautionary tales. The friends dismissed the lore as mere folklore, their youthful optimism overshadowing any lingering sense of dread. From their vantage point hundreds of feet above the lagoons, the vibrant coral reefs seemed to glow in the sun. Schools of fish darted beneath the clear water, creating mesmerizing patterns against the white sand. Natalia pointed excitedly at the outlines of giant turtles gliding through the gentle currents. Zara snapped photo after photo, striving to capture the moment's magic. Even Ben, usually the most reserved of the group, couldn't hide the wonder in his eyes. The crew on the boat far below seemed like tiny figures, signaling them to enjoy their flight's remaining minutes before reeling them back in. The motor's hum and fellow tourists' soft chatter created a comforting sense of normalcy. The ocean felt vast but not threatening, and the fearsome legends of the Leviathan faded into distant background noise. Suddenly, something rippled beneath the surface near their parasail. A chill ran down Natalia's spine, a primal instinct screaming that this was no harmless fish. A sense of unease prickled along her arms as she focused on the dark shape circling ominously beneath their parasail. It grew larger with every rotation, her grin fading into a look of concern. Natalia called out to Ben and Zara, but the wind carried her voice away. Then, in a surge of movement that seemed to defy physics, the massive shark breached the surface. Its jaws filled with rows of razor-sharp teeth, stretched wide in an impossible display of predatory power. Time fractured as the terrifying reality took hold. The shark hit the parasail lines, sending Natalia, Ben, and Zara hurtling towards the ocean in a tangle of cloth and desperation. Natalia's stomach lurched as the icy water enveloped her. She crashed through the surface, the remnants of the parasail snagging her. In the disorienting swirl, she saw the monstrous form of the shark pass just inches away, a flicker of white teeth and chillingly blank eyes. Terror fueled her as she kicked and fought, finally ripping herself free of the fabric. Frantically, she scanned the water for Ben and Zara, spotting them struggling nearby. The shark was circling, its movements deliberate, ready for another strike. The boat seemed like an impossible dream, a tiny speck against the vastness of the ocean. A crowd had formed on the shore, their shouts of alarm swallowed by the wind. Despair threatened to engulf her. Suddenly, Zara screamed. Natalia watched in horror as her friend flailed wildly, a spray of crimson blooming around her in the water. The shark thrashed, dragging Zara beneath the surface in a frenzy of foam. Fueled by adrenaline, Ben reached for her, his fingers missing her outstretched hand as she disappeared. Sobbing, Natalia and Ben clung to each other, a desperate bid for comfort against the swirling nightmare. The water around them churned red, and the scent of blood drove the shark into a heightened state of attack. With each pass of its monstrous form, they held their breath, waiting for the final fatal strike. A gunshot rang out, momentarily cutting through their terror. Another followed, and then another. A small dinghy appeared seemingly out of nowhere, a team of islanders with rifles positioned precariously on the tiny craft. It aimed at the shark, providing a welcome distraction. With renewed desperation, Ben and Natalia started swimming towards the approaching boat. The dinghy pulled alongside, rough hands hauling them on board. They collapsed onto the floor of the small vessel, the full impact of what had just transpired finally crashing over them. The islanders brought them ashore, not to the familiar beaches of the Aitutaki Islands, but to a small, uninhabited stretch of sand, a desolate refuge in their storm of terror. They were safe for now, but the island offered little respite. The ocean, transformed from paradise into a killing field, was an omnipresent threat. The shark, they knew, still patrolled the surrounding waters, its hunger unsated. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the island, the full horror of their predicament hit Natalia and Ben. They were stranded, survivors of the initial attack, but now exposed on this barren island, with a relentless predator lurking offshore. They scoured the island for anything edible, subsisting on meager scraps of shellfish and coconuts. They built signal fires, desperately scanning the horizon for rescue, but their hopes dwindled with each passing day. The vast emptiness of the ocean offered no relief, the shark a constant, unseen presence. Despair started to creep in. a chilling counterpoint to the adrenaline that had kept them fighting. Then, on the brink of exhaustion, they spotted a flicker of white on the horizon. A sail, small at first but growing larger with each passing minute. With a surge of hope, they frantically reignited their dwindling signal fire and waved the tattered remnants of their parasail. It took hours, but finally the boat reached them. It wasn't a grand rescue vessel, just a small fishing boat with a crew who had been alerted to their plight by the islanders. Tears of relief streamed down Natalia and Ben's faces as they were pulled aboard. They were weak, battered, and haunted by their near-death experience. But they were alive. The news of the incident sent shockwaves through the Aitutaki Islands. The whispers about the Leviathan transformed from legend into a chilling reality. Locals nervously scanned the waters, their once carefree relationship with the ocean forever tainted. Natalia and Ben, haunted by the attack, found little solace in the fact that they had survived. Parasail bulged above Lily Evans, catching the warm Pacific wind like a brightly colored sail. Below her, the sparkling waters of the famed Kayanapali beach on the Hawaiian island of Maui teemed with tropical fish, a kaleidoscope of color visible even from high above the waves. This was a solo adventure, a gift to herself after months of demanding workdays and relentless stress in Los Angeles. Today, September 22, 2005, was all about escape. A successful marketing executive, Lily felt a sense of freedom, unlike anything she had experienced in years. The relentless demands of her clients and the constant pressure to deliver results faded into the background. High above the scenic Hawaiian coastline, she was weightless and carefree, a world away from the relentless hustle of her usual life. The gentle tug of the line tethering her to the boat was comforting. Below, the experienced crew handled the maneuvering while she enjoyed the breathtaking views. Today wasn't about achieving a goal or meeting a deadline, but simply being. Lily, usually focused and driven, allowed herself to luxuriate in the pure enjoyment of the moment. Despite Hawaii's reputation for tiger sharks, the waters around Maui were considered relatively safe. Great whites were incredibly rare this far out in the Pacific. The locals had reassured her that shark encounters here were exceedingly uncommon. Lily, usually a worrier, let go of her fears and embraced the thrill of the experience. Suddenly, a dark shape detached itself from the shimmering depths below. Moving with shocking speed, it glided ominously beneath her parasail. Lily's carefree joy turned to a jolt of fear. The shark seemed to mirror her movements momentarily, a silent predator fixated on its prey. Lily thought that perhaps it was a dolphin, but her common sense rebelled. No dolphin was that large. This was a great white shark, its movements smooth and purposeful. She watched in horrified fascination as it circled, seemingly sizing her up. Her heart pounded in her chest, an insistent rhythm of terror that drowned out the gentle rush of the wind. Time seemed to bend strangely. Below, the boat seemed impossibly far away, no longer a reassuring presence. It was just her, alone against a creature perfectly evolved for hunting. Panic threatened to overwhelm Lily as her worst fear turned into a terrifying reality. The shark, with chilling precision, began to ascend towards her. She could see its eyes now, devoid of anything resembling warmth or recognition. There was just cold calculation, a single-minded determination to feed. With a sickening jolt, she felt the parasail lines go taut as the shark lunged upwards. Its massive form thrashed on the surface, snapping at the parachute's fabric. The force of the impact ripped her violently sideways, and the harness strained against her body. Lily screamed, a raw sound of fear swallowed by the vastness of the sky and sea. Then, as suddenly as it attacked, the shark disappeared into the depths. Lily dangled precariously, the sudden silence almost more terrifying than the frantic attack. She knew it was only a reprieve. The predator was down there, biding its time, waiting for another opportunity. The crew on the boat had finally realized Lily's dire situation. They were frantically maneuvering closer, yelling for her to stay still. It seemed like an eternity before the boat edged near. One of the crew tossed a rope towards her legs, shouting at her to grab on for dear life. Desperation fueled her as she fumbled for the rope, her fingers numb and clumsy with fear. The shark could reappear at any second. She just needed a moment, a chance to escape. Just as her fingers finally secured a hold, She felt an agonizing jolt as weight seized the rope. In a frenzy of thrashing and foam, the shark erupted from the water again. Its jaws locked on the rope just inches from Lily's legs, and time splintered as she watched the boat being pulled backward with jarring force. If the rope snapped, she would be thrown into the water directly in the path of the monstrous predator. Then a gunshot rang out across the water. The shark thrashed wildly, releasing the rope. A second shot echoed, and the giant predator finally retreated, leaving a trail of blood in its wake. Lily could vaguely see a second boat out of the haze, its occupants part of the rescue effort. With shaking hands, Lily grasped the rope again, and the crew pulled her towards the boat with terrifying speed. Collapsing into the rough wooden flooring, she gasped for breath, unable to halt the sobs that racked her body. She was alive, but the ocean would never again feel like a place of carefree joy. Back on shore, the attack became local news, a grim reminder that nature's dangers lurked even in paradise. Though Lily's physical wounds were minor, the emotional scars ran deep. Nightmares of the shark's menacing eyes haunted her long after her return to California. She hired a therapist and learned coping mechanisms to manage the trauma. But the primal fear of the open ocean never fully abated. The solo adventure meant to be a source of freedom and escape irrevocably changed Lily. She rebuilt her life, finding joy in other pursuits. Yet on quiet nights, when the wind whipped through her window, she would cast a frightened glance towards the horizon, imagining the silent depths and the predators that lurked beneath the wave. Dr. Amelia Carter scanned the endless expanse of Antarctic ice, her breath misting in the frigid December 21st, 2006 air. From their small research vessel stationed at Palmer Station, she and her team, Ethan Taylor and Sophia Ortiz, were about to embark on a unique data collection mission. They were part of an international expedition studying the alarming effects of climate change on this fragile ecosystem. Amelia, an accomplished climatologist, had dedicated her life to studying the Earth's shifting patterns. The invitation to join this research expedition in Antarctica culminated in years of relentless work. Ethan, with his expertise in meteorology, brought an additional layer of understanding to their data collection, while Sophia, a marine biologist, focused on the expedition's underwater surveys. This crisp summer day in December 2006 was ideal for their mission. Their plan involved using a parasail outfitted with specialized monitoring equipment to gain a panoramic view of the melting ice flows and shifting glacier patterns. From their vantage point, they could track changes undetectable from ground level. The results of their work would be used to inform global initiatives aimed at mitigating the devastating impacts of climate change. Despite the desolate environment, the waters around Antarctica teemed with life, a complex food chain built around the abundance of plankton and krill. Seals, penguins, and whales were common sightings. While shark encounters were rare, they weren't unheard of. The team was briefed on the slim potential for encountering a Greenland shark, or perhaps the more remote possibility of a great white drawn to the area by unusual currents. Yet, the icy waters seemed an unlikely hunting ground for an apex predator accustomed to warmer climates. With their equipment meticulously calibrated, the day's work was progressing smoothly. Amelia, lost in her analysis of the shifting ice patterns, had a fleeting concern about their visibility as a brightly colored target against the stark white landscape. She pushed the worry aside, rationalizing that any curious creatures below would have long since acclimated to the research station's presence. Ethan is usually cheerful and points towards a crack in the ice far below them. It wasn't unusual to see seals sunning themselves, but something about this one's movement seemed odd. A knot of unease tightened in Amelia's stomach as they drifted closer. This was no seal. A massive dark shape moved beneath the surface, obscuring their view, the sleekness of its form impossible to mistake. Her heart hammered in her chest, a mix of disbelief and primal fear. Every instinct screamed at her to escape the predator lurking below the surface. The great white shark, a creature honed for killing, ascended with deceptive speed. Its gaping jaws could quickly engulf their brightly colored parasail whole. The boat was too far away, and their radio calls seemed to vanish into the vast nothingness of the icy landscape. The wind, once a gentle force propelling them, now whipped against them with chilling intensity. They were trapped, their fate tied to the whim of the predator circling just below. and time warped into a grotesque blur of panicked thoughts and desperate attempts to find a way out of this nightmare. The shark lunged, its immense body breaching the surface in an explosion of water and teeth. Fabric ripped and lines snapped under the relentless assault. Amelia, Ethan, and Sophia were sent tumbling, their screams whipped away by the unforgiving wind. Salt water stung their eyes, blurring their vision as the world around them became a chaos of thrashing limbs and churning water. Amelia felt the shock of icy water as she plunged below the surface. Her thick wetsuit was a meager defense against the numbing cold. Frantically kicking, she resurfaced with a gasp, her lungs burning, her movements sluggish in the frigid temperature. The monstrous form of the shark circled back, a constant, menacing presence in the murky water. Suddenly, a sharp crack of gunfire echoed across the ice. Confusion momentarily rippled through the shark's movements. The crew on their research vessel had spotted the attack and had reacted with surprising speed. Another shot rang out, the bullets hitting the water around the massive predator. It was a desperate attempt to distract it and buy the team some precious time. Hope surged as she saw a Zodiac inflatable craft speeding towards her. Its arrival felt like a miracle in the vast, unforgiving landscape. Amelia watched as the seemingly disoriented shark suddenly lashed out at the parasail. Ethan and Sophia were still entangled in the harness, desperately clinging to what remained of the fabric and lines. More gunshots rang out, and finally the shark retreated, dragging the remnants of the parasail with it. Rough hands hoisted Amelia into the inflatable, the relief mixed with terror over the fate of Ethan and Sophia. Moments later, another rescue craft sped past, carrying her teammates towards the station's safety. They were alive, but their ordeal was far from over. The parasail bulged like a giant, colorful balloon in the wind, carrying Sarah Williams higher and higher above Rainbow Bay on this sun-drenched July 8, 2009. The sprawling Gold Coast of Australia stretched out below her in miniature, the roar of the surf replaced by the gentle whoosh of wind against the fabric. It was a perfect day for this once-in-a-lifetime adventure. A birthday gift from her thrill-seeking boyfriend, Jake Johnson, who piloted the speedboat that towed her skyward. Sarah, an office worker usually confined to a windowless cubicle, felt a surge of liberation. The nagging worries about deadlines and reports faded away, replaced by a sense of awe at the world's vastness from this unique perspective. Jake, waving cheerfully from far below, was now the size of an ant, his boisterous grin just a speck on the turquoise water. For a moment, life felt like a joyful adventure rather than an endless routine. The coastline snaked away in either direction, a patchwork of sandy beaches and rocky headlands. Schools of silvery fish darted under the parasail's shadow, their movements hypnotic. Sarah had always felt safe swimming in these waters, reassured by the presence of lifeguards perched on their tall chairs and the familiar sight of surfers bobbing on the horizon. Today, she felt a strange sense of unease, exposed and vulnerable far above the protective shoreline. Great white sharks, though not as common as in some parts of the world, were known to patrol Australia's coastline. The thought usually didn't bother Sarah despite the occasional sensationalized news story. Yet something about the interplay of her shadow and the sun dappling the ocean stirred a primal fear, a nagging sense that she wasn't alone. She pushed the unsettling thought aside, reminding herself of the rarity of shark attacks and trying to focus on the exhilarating beauty of the flight instead. The boat slowed, the engines sputtering as Jake adjusted their course. Sarah felt a gentle dip as they changed direction, the view of the coastline shifting. Below, the water changed from a bright, inviting blue to a murkier green. It looked deeper out here, a vast expanse that made her stomach twist like no roller coaster. Her heart thumped faster as she searched the depths below, straining to see any signs of marine life. She told herself she was being ridiculous. Fear had no place on this perfect day meant for making memories. Jake shouted something to her, but the wind carried his words away. Suddenly, the parasail lurched downwards violently, tugging hard against the harness she wore. Sarah gasped, her view tilting wildly as the boat accelerated at an impossible speed. Then a horrifying realization struck her. She wasn't being pulled by the boat anymore. Something else had the line. Sarah screamed, a raw sound of terror lost in the roar of the wind. The parasail twisted violently, sending her spinning sickeningly. Below, the surface of the water churned with an ominous force. Then, in a heart-stopping moment, the monstrous shark breached the surface, its massive jaws snapping open in a spray of salt water just inches from the dangling lines. Sarah's harness creaked under the strain as the shark's weight jerked her downwards. The water was suddenly shockingly close. Time seemed to distort as Sarah yanked through the air and plunged violently below the surface. Cold water enveloped her, a suffocating shock after the freedom of the sky. Salt water burned her eyes and lungs as she fought against the tangled mess of the parasail, her limbs flailing. Then, just as suddenly as she'd been pulled under, Sarah was yanked upwards, gasping for air. She blinked, salt water stinging her eyes as she realized the shark had released its grip on the line. However, the danger was far from over. The parasail, ripped and partially deflated, struggled to stay airborne. Sarah was being dragged relentlessly through the water, her body feeling like the sheer force would tear it apart. Each time a wave crashed over her, it was a struggle to surface again. She could see the shore in the distance, a tantalizing strip of safety that seemed impossibly far. Her muscles burned with the effort of clinging to the shredded lines. Panic warred with a desperate survival instinct. Below, the dark shape of the shark circled ominously, always just out of reach. Sarah knew it was only a matter of time before it attacked again. On the shoreline, a crowd had gathered, alerted by Sarah's frantic movements and the strange behavior of the parasail. Jake finally realized the horrific danger Sarah was in and gunned the boat towards her, shouting for her to hold on. As Sarah felt she couldn't endure another second, a new terror seized her. The shark launched upwards with horrifying speed, its massive body crashing into the remains of the parasail. The harness snapped. Sarah plummeted through the air, a desperate cry escaping her lips as she braced for the impact. The water hit her with bruising force, knocking the wind from her lungs. She fought to stay conscious as the relentless waves crashed over her, disorienting her further. Spots danced before her eyes and her battered body begged for respite. Strong hands hauled her out of the ocean and into the boat when she began to sink into the welcoming darkness. Jake's face was a mask of anguish as he bundled her into a rough blanket, shouting for emergency services. On the beach, horrified onlookers were already calling the Coast Guard. News helicopters appeared on the horizon, drawn by the promise of a dramatic rescue story. Coughing and shivering, Sarah was rushed to the hospital. Miraculously, her injuries were limited to cuts, bruises, and a mild concussion. But the emotional aftermath was far more severe. Nightmares of the shark's menacing shape and the endless pull of the waves haunted her sleep. The joy she had once found in the ocean was tainted with a new understanding of its unpredictable power. The attack in Rainbow Bay became a local sensation. Sarah reluctantly found herself fielding calls from reporters, reliving the ordeal each time. Yet she also discovered a newfound sense of gratitude. The ordinary moments, once taken for granted, felt precious now. The world itself seemed brighter. She had cheated death in the depths of the ocean, and her perspective on life would never be the same. In 2012, 5 friends embarked on an adventurous camping trip to the secluded coast of El Nido, Palawan, Philippines. The pristine beaches, fringed by towering limestone cliffs and lush tropical foliage, promised a serene escape from the hustle and bustle of city life. Leading the charge was Liam Mercado, an outdoor enthusiast who thirsted for exploration. His friends, Samantha Villanueva, Jericho Reyes, Miguel Santos, and Isabel Alvarez, shared his passion for adventure and were eager to trade the concrete jungle for a few days of untamed beauty. As their pickup truck rumbled along the winding coastal road, the group couldn't help but marvel at the breathtaking scenery that unfolded before them. The azure waters of the West Philippine Sea sparkled invitingly, while the white sandy beaches seemed to beckon them towards a tranquil paradise. After a 2-hour drive, they finally reached their destination, a remote cove tucked away from the well-trodden tourist spots. Liam had stumbled upon this hidden gem during a previous hiking expedition and couldn't wait to share its beauty with his friends. They quickly set up their tents, assembling a cozy base camp amidst the swaying palm trees. The waves gently lapping against the shore provided a soothing backdrop to their laughter and banter as they unpacked their supplies. The first day was spent lounging on the beach, soaking up the warm tropical sun and swimming in the crystal-clear waters. Jericho, a self-proclaimed adrenaline junkie, even managed to convince the group to try their hand at cliff jumping from the nearby limestone formations. As the sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Samantha noticed something peculiar. She signaled the rest to confirm if they had seen something, her brow furrowed in concern. The others turned to follow her gaze, scanning the water's surface. That's when they spotted a dark triangular fin slicing through the waves, unmistakably belonging to a shark. Liam waved it off, his voice reassuring. Liam was not worried as the thought of it probably being just a reef shark came in. He exclaimed that they were harmless and quite common in those waters. The group accepted his explanation, but Samantha couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in the pit of her stomach. As night fell, they gathered around the crackling campfire, roasting marshmallows and swapping stories, the earlier sighting of the shark temporarily forgotten. A natural storyteller, Miguel regaled them with tales of his previous camping adventures, his animated gestures casting flickering shadows across their faces. It wasn't until the following morning that the true gravity of their situation became apparent. Isabel had woken early, drawn to the tranquil waters by the promise of a refreshing morning swim. As she waded into the shallows, her eyes widened in shock at the sight before her. Dozens of sharks, their sleek bodies gliding effortlessly through the turquoise waters, patrolled the shoreline. Panic gripped her and she hurried back to the safety of the beach, her heart pounding in her chest. She cried, signaling them to wake up, her voice tinged with fear. There were sharks everywhere. The others sprang into action, their eyes widening as they took in the unsettling scene. The once peaceful cove had transformed into a veritable feeding ground, teeming with the unmistakable silhouettes of hungry sharks. Liam's face paled as he recognized the distinctive shape of the predators, blacktip reef sharks, known for their aggressive nature and territorial behavior. He muttered that it wasn't good, his mind racing to formulate a plan. They needed to return to the truck and leave there immediately. The group quickly packed up their belongings, their movements hurried and tense. Ever the daredevil, Jericho couldn't resist one last dip in the water, much to the others' dismay. As he waded out into the shallows, the sharks seemed to take notice, their sleek bodies drawing closer to the thrashing figure. Samantha watched in horror as one particularly bold specimen surged towards Jericho, its mighty jaws snapping shut mere inches from his leg. She screamed to Jericho, her voice shrill with terror. Thankfully, Jericho heeded her warning, scrambling back towards the safety of the beach, his face pale and his body trembling from the close call. With their supplies hastily packed and their nerves frayed, the group set off towards the narrow path that led back to their vehicle. Their footsteps hurried, and their eyes scanning the water's edge for any sign of the prowling sharks. The path wound along the coastline, hugging the rocky cliffs and offering little protection from the encroaching tide. As they rounded a particularly treacherous bend, Miguel's foot caught on a loose rock, sending him tumbling towards the water's edge. A black-tip shark materialized from the depths in a heartbeat, its mighty jaws clamping down on Miguel's outstretched leg. The sickening crunch of bone echoed across the cove as the shark thrashed violently, dragging the screaming Miguel deeper into the water. The others watched in horror, frozen in place by the gruesome scene unfolding before them. Liam finally sprang into action, grabbing a nearby branch and charging towards the shark, his face contorted with rage and determination. The shark, momentarily startled by the commotion, released its grip on Miguel's mangled leg, allowing Liam and Jericho to drag their injured friend back to safety. Isabel and Samantha quickly fashioned a makeshift tourniquet, their hands trembling as they worked to stem the blood flow. Miguel's face was ashen, his eyes glazed with pain and shock. They had to get out of with their voices barely above a whisper. The group pressed on, their pace slowed by Miguel's injury but fueled by a renewed sense of urgency. The path seemed to stretch endlessly before them, each twist and turn revealing more treacherous terrain, and the ever-present threat of the sharks lurking in the shallows. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they caught sight of their pickup truck, miraculously untouched amidst the chaos. With renewed determination, they hurried towards the vehicle, their shoes slapping against the sand as they ran. Liam fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking as he unlocked the doors and ushered the others inside. Miguel's ragged breathing filled the cabin as Samantha and Isabel tended to his wounds, their faces etched with worry. As the truck roared to life, Liam gunned the engine, the tires kicking up a plume of sand as they hurtled down the narrow path toward the main road. Sensing the commotion, the sharks surged towards the retreating vehicle, their sleek bodies cutting through the water with terrifying speed. Jericho watched in horror as one particularly tenacious black-tip shark leaped from the water, its mighty jaws snapping shut mere inches from the rear window. Liam's knuckles turned white as he gripped the steering wheel, his foot flooring the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, careening around sharp bends and leaving the sharks in their wake. It wasn't until they reached the main coastal road that the group breathed a sigh of relief. Miguel's condition, however, remained critical, and they knew they needed to get him to a hospital as soon as possible. In the weeks and months that followed, the scars of their encounter would heal, but the memories would linger forever. Miguel, his leg permanently disfigured by the shark's vicious attack, found solace in the unwavering support of his friends. Later, the group remained inseparable, their bond forged in the crucible of their shared experience. They became advocates for responsible ecotourism, sharing their cautionary tales with others and promoting a greater understanding of the delicate balance between humans and the natural world. As the sun lay below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and red, the group looked back on their harrowing ordeal with a newfound respect for nature's power and unpredictability. What had begun as a peaceful camping trip had quickly descended into a nightmarish struggle for survival against the very creatures they had come to admire. What began as a simple and unassuming rain quickly escalated into the most catastrophic event ever, hitting the beach city of Rio de Janeiro. A torrential downpour of epic proportions ravaged the city for 10 days, transforming its streets, alleys, and buildings into raging rivers. The impact was particularly devastating in the northern part of the city, where its onslaught first began. In the initial days, the rain fell slowly and steadily. Still, as the hours turned into days, its intensity grew, wreaking havoc on the city's infrastructure and bringing economic activities to a grinding halt. Water levels rose rapidly, submerging cars and flooding major thoroughfares, turning them into impassable rivers. A dozen bus lines were forced to shut down, and several metro stations were closed due to water affecting the tracks. The relentless rainfall showed no signs of abating, with some areas receiving a year's worth of rain in just 72 hours. Despite the valiant efforts of firefighters to respond to the crisis, their own lives were put at risk by the unforgiving rain. Calls for help overwhelmed their lines, with reports of missing persons flooding in, but the ongoing rain hampered rescue efforts, leaving many stranded and vulnerable. Injured individuals in desperate need of medical attention found themselves trapped in their homes as the floodwaters surged around them. Hospitals, typically places of refuge and safety, were not spared from the storm's wrath. In one of the worst affected neighborhoods, floodwaters seeped into hospital basements, affecting offices and disrupting critical services. After the catastrophic hurricane, the once vibrant urban landscape lay submerged beneath a turbulent sea. The towering buildings, once symbols of progress and prosperity, now lay in ruins, their shattered remnants barely visible beneath the dark, churning waters. For the residents who had weathered the storm, it was a scene of unimaginable devastation. A city transformed overnight into a watery graveyard of shattered dreams and broken promises. Yet, amidst the chaos and despair, a new threat emerged, a silent menace that lurked beneath the surface, biding its time. Displaced by the storm's ferocity, bull sharks ventured into the city, their predatory instincts heightened by the scent of blood and fear. For the beleaguered residents who dared to brave the treacherous waters, every journey became a gamble with their lives. Canoes and makeshift boats became the primary mode of transportation, as families navigated through the submerged streets in search of higher ground and safety. Among those who ventured into the watery depths was Maria Sanchez, a single mother of two who had lost everything in the storm. When the hurricane struck with devastating force, Maria was at work, separated from her children, who were thankfully safe at school. With a heart heavy with grief and uncertainty, Maria set out to reunite with her beloved children, determined to protect and provide for them in the face of adversity. With her 2 children by her side, Maria paddled through the depths, her arms aching with every stroke. Yet despite the overwhelming odds stacked against her, she refused to succumb to despair. As they navigated the treacherous waters, Maria and her children were devastated. Homes lay submerged beneath the floodwaters, their contents scattered and destroyed by the relentless force of nature. Yet amidst the wreckage, Maria witnessed moments of compassion and solidarity as neighbors banded together to support and assist those in need. With trembling hands, Maria and her children began to sift through the wreckage left after the devastating hurricane, searching for anything salvageable amidst the debris. Maria prepared to make their escape, gathering what few belongings they could salvage. But just as they were about to leave, disaster struck. The water surged forward, knocking Maria off her feet and tumbling into the depths below. As she struggled to break free, she felt a sharp pain shoot through her leg, followed by a rush of warmth as blood mingled with the water around her. With mounting dread, she realized she had fallen victim to the sharks that now circled hungrily around her, their jaws snapping with savage ferocity as they closed in for the kill. But Maria refused to give up hope. With a strength born of desperation, she fought against the current, clawing toward the surface with every ounce of her being. In a stroke of luck, her hand found purchase on a broken plank floating nearby, and she used it as a makeshift weapon to fend off her attackers. With a final desperate blow, she struck the nearest shark with all her might, causing it to retreat in pain. With her children watching in horror from the safety of a nearby pavement, Maria summoned every last ounce of strength and swam towards them, her injured leg throbbing with pain. Together, they clung to each other for support as they made their escape, the memory of their harrowing ordeal etched into their minds forever. But Maria's brush with death was not an isolated incident. In the aftermath of the hurricane, there were numerous reports of shark attacks on unsuspecting residents who found themselves trapped in the floodwaters. Some, like Maria, were lucky enough to survive with injuries, while others were not so fortunate. Their lives were tragically cut short by the relentless predators that now roamed the city streets. In response to the growing crisis, authorities emerged, deploying water guides and necessary officials to address the shark-infested waters. With swift and decisive action, all sharks discovered in the city were euthanized, bringing an end to the reign of terror that had gripped the community. As the floodwaters slowly receded in the following weeks, the community was left to assess the extent of the damage and plan to prevent future incidents. One fateful evening, the popular restaurant overlooking the pristine beaches of the Maldives welcomed a spectacular visitor, Dennis and Catherine, a Canadian couple embarking on their dream honeymoon. After 2 blissful years together, their love deepened with each passing day, culminating in an elaborate wedding ceremony in one of Canada's grandest churches. Their honeymoon plans had been set in motion months before the wedding, as they meticulously booked their luxurious hotel in the Maldives through a trusted agent. Immediately after their heartfelt wedding ceremony, they boarded a plane bound for the sun-kissed shores of the Maldives, eager to start their new chapter as husband and wife. The first 2 days of their honeymoon were spent in blissful relaxation, indulgent spa treatments, and romantic dinners under the stars. Every moment was filled with love and laughter as they celebrated their union in paradise. On the 3rd day of their honeymoon, Dennis and Catherine found themselves at the beachside restaurant, enjoying a sumptuous seafood lunch while overlooking the enchanting topaz waters below. The gentle lapping of the waves and the soft caress of the sea breeze created the perfect ambiance for a romantic afternoon. As they savored the last bites of their meal, Dennis excused himself to settle the bill, leaving Catherine alone to admire the breathtaking view. Then he overheard a conversation at the counter about the beach's current conditions. His curiosity piqued, and Dennis inquired further, only to be met with a sobering response. Sharks had been spotted in the area recently, making it dangerous for swimming. The news sent a shiver down Dennis's spine as he returned to Catherine's side, his thoughts consumed by the warning they had just received. Though they returned to their hotel, the longing to immerse themselves in the crystal-clear waters of the ocean lingered in their minds. Despite the warning, Dennis and Catherine couldn't shake the desire to experience the magic of the Maldives' pristine beaches firsthand. Dennis and Catherine felt a magnetic pull towards the beach as the sun dipped below the horizon. The allure of the fresh sea air, a welcome change from the artificial coolness of their hotel's air conditioning, beckoned them to the shore. Despite the earlier warnings and the somber atmosphere over the beach, the couple couldn't resist the ocean's call. They found themselves at the beach pier, where they sat hand in hand, silently soaking in the evening's tranquility. Once bustling with activity, the beach now lay deserted, the only sound being the gentle rustle of the palm trees in the breeze. Yet despite the eerie calm, a sense of peace enveloped them, as if they were the only two people in the world. As the moon rose high in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the water, Dennis's mind sparked with an idea. Why not take advantage of the deserted beach and indulge in a romantic swim under the moonlight? With a mischievous twinkle in his eye, he shared his suggestion with Catherine, who responded with an enthusiastic nod. With their decision made, Dennis and Catherine wasted no time shedding their clothes and wading into the cool embrace of the ocean. The water enveloped them like a lover's embrace, its gentle caress a soothing balm to their souls. They laughed and splashed like children, their voices mingling with the rhythmic lapping of the waves as they ventured further from shore. The water stirred some distance from them as if drawn by the night or their murmured conversation. Catherine noticed the disturbance, and her attention was momentarily caught. Unknown to them, danger was concealed beneath the surface, hidden within the shadows of the moonlight. Dennis and Catherine's carefree evening turned sinister as the ripples transformed into a dark, ominous shape. Dread crept into their hearts like a cold, clammy hand as the shadow grew more extensive and defined. With mounting horror, they realized they were not alone in the water. A massive form circled beneath them, its sleek silhouette a chilling reminder of the ocean's untamed power. It was a more formidable giant shark than any they had ever encountered, its eyes glinting with predatory hunger in the moonlight. Fear seized Dennis and Catherine in its icy grip as they stared down at the creature, its presence casting a shadow over their once idyllic evening. With trembling hands and racing hearts, Dennis and Catherine knew they had to act fast. Without hesitation, they turned and began to swim for shore, their movements frantic and erratic. But the shark, sensing their vulnerability, struck with lightning speed, its jaws snapping shut just inches from their trembling bodies. Miraculously, they managed to evade the first attack, but knew they were not out of danger yet. Adrenaline fueled their desperate flight as they pushed themselves to their limits, the shore seeming impossibly distant with each passing moment. The relentless pull of the ocean threatened to drag them under, but they refused to succumb to despair. Yet despite their valiant efforts, the shark struck again, its mighty jaws closing around Dennis's leg with a vice-like grip. The searing pain ripped through his body, but Dennis refused to show his helplessness. With Catherine's support, they struggled to free his leg from the shark's grasp, their efforts fueled by sheer determination and a will to survive. After several tense moments, they finally managed to break free, with Dennis's leg bearing a deep gash from the shark's razor-sharp teeth. But despite the pain and the fear that threatened to consume them, Dennis and Catherine refused to give up. With unwavering resolve, they continued their harrowing journey towards shore, their love for each other as a beacon of hope in the darkness. With Dennis injured, Catherine knew they had to act fast. With adrenaline coursing through their veins, they redoubled their efforts, their minds focused solely on survival. Finally, after an eternity, they felt the soft, grainy sand beneath their feet. With one last surge of strength, they stumbled onto the shore, gasping for breath as they collapsed onto the sand. They changed into their clothes, and Catherine quickly dialed their agent, who arrived promptly by car to take them to the hospital. Dennis's wound was cared for, and the doctors worked swiftly to treat his injury. Though their honeymoon had taken an unexpected turn, Catherine remained steadfast by Dennis's side, offering him comfort and reassurance in the face of adversity. Despite the setback, they found solace in knowing they had faced the danger together and emerged stronger. In 2009, a private charter plane flying over the remote Cook Islands in the South Pacific encountered severe turbulence and storms as it traversed the vast open waters between French Polynesia and Samoa. On board were Zethrid Melik, a wealthy businessman, his wife Giotica and their teenage son Chakor, Marvik Siraj, Zethrid's assistant, Inaya Devi, a family friend, and Elian Cruz, the pilot. Despite Elian's efforts, the plane lost altitude rapidly and crashed into the open ocean. After inflating a life raft and rowing to shore, the 6 survivors were stranded on a remote, uninhabited island. With limited supplies salvaged from the wreckage, they quickly realized the dire nature of their situation. Food and fresh water were scarce, and they had no means of signaling for rescue. Zethrid determined their best hope was to fish from the island's shoreline, using makeshift equipment crafted from the plane's debris. However, their efforts soon attracted an unwanted visitor, a massive bull shark stalking the shallows. On their 4th fishing attempt, Giotica felt a powerful tug on her line as the considerable shark struck, nearly pulling her into the bloody turmoil before the line snapped. The group scattered back from the water's edge, shaken by the close call but undeterred in their need for sustenance. They cautiously resumed fishing over the next few days while one person stood sentry to fend off further attacks. The bull shark grew increasingly aggressive, recognizing their activities as a food source. When it struck again, this time going after Chakor, Elian and Marvik had to intervene to prevent the teen from being pulled into the shark's gaping maw. Realizing that their fishing expeditions were too hazardous to continue, the castaways had to find another means of survival. As they were coping with dehydration beneath the scorching sun, Inaya proposed an ingenious solution, using plastic bottles and salt water to create rudimentary solar stills, to extract fresh drinking water through evaporation and condensation. Her plan was a success, providing enough hydration to reinvigorate the group. However, maintaining and expanding the stills would require them to perilously venture close to the shoreline, within reach of the ravenous shark patrolling the shallows. Keeping a vigilant lookout with makeshift spears at the ready, they began digging additional still pits all along the beach, exposing themselves directly to the predator's territory. Their struggle to survive had transformed into a battle of wits and resourcefulness against a relentless, primordial adversary. As the days passed without rescue, the castaways were pitted in an escalating life-or-death contest with the ancient Leviathan lurking just offshore. With their solar stills providing only temporary respite, they would have to take even more risks and push their luck further to outlast the island's resident hunter. On the 18th day, Elian and Marvik were hard at work digging a new still pit when the massive bull shark suddenly emerged from the shallows, its gaping jaws wide to ambush them. Acting quickly, Zethrid grabbed one of the sharpened spears and plunged it into the shark's mouth as it lunged. The strike wasn't deep enough to be fatal, but it was enough to drive the primordial beast back and make it reconsider its easy meal. From then on, the castaways' makeshift defensive tactics kept the vengeful shark at bay while maintaining their still operations. 2 days later, a marine research vessel passing through the area picked up the group's faint emergency signals and found them just in time to airlift them to safety. Though deeply shaken, the island survivors had outwitted and outlasted one of nature's most formidable predators through their perseverance and ingenuity. In the aftermath, the Melik family used their wealth and influence to champion shark conservation efforts and fund further research into sustainable marine ecosystems. Their harrowing ordeal reminded us that despite our capabilities, humanity will always be humbled by nature's incredible, inscrutable forces when we encroach on their territory. In the depths of the Atlantic Ocean, Deborah Lawson found her sanctuary. A sanctuary she hadn't always been brave enough to explore. Deborah had always been enamored with wildlife photography, but her fear of encountering wild animals that could potentially harm her or others had kept her from pursuing her passion. A particular incident solidified this fear for her. While on a photography expedition in the Amazon rainforest, Deborah faced a deadly snake. It had slithered dangerously close to her, its venomous fangs poised to strike. If it weren't for the protection of the glass encampment she was in, Deborah's life might have been extinguished. That encounter had shaken her to the core, instilling a deep-seated fear of the unknown that had held her back for years. However, fate led us down unexpected paths, and for Deborah, that path led straight to the ocean. It was a realm she had always been drawn to, its vastness both exhilarating and humbling. Despite her initial reservations, Deborah was drawn to the underwater world, captivated by its beauty and charisma. Deborah discovered a newfound sense of purpose and passion as she delved deeper into marine photography. She marveled at the ocean's wonders with each dive, from the vibrant coral reefs teeming with life to the majestic creatures that called it home. Armed with her camera and courage, she set out to capture the beauty of this underwater realm, one frame at a time. Over time, Deborah became a seasoned diver and photographer, honing her skills and pushing herself to new depths, literally and figuratively. She explored countless underwater realms, from the Caribbean's crystal-clear waters to the Arctic Ocean's icy depths. With each expedition, she pushed the boundaries of her fears and limitations, immersing herself in the awe-inspiring beauty of the underwater world. One particular expedition stands out in Deborah's memory. It was a journey to the remote waters of the South Pacific, where she had the opportunity to photograph one of the ocean's most elusive shark breeds. It was a dream come true for Deborah, a chance to capture these magnificent predators' raw power and beauty in their natural habitat. As usual, Deborah got her camera gear, diving equipment, and helping hands aboard a vessel for research expeditions. She heard from a diver about a school of rarely seen sharks discovered in the ocean. So she wanted to try her luck and have it revealed to the world to her credit. For a day, they scoured the ocean depths, following whispers and rumors in pursuit of their elusive quarry. Then on the second day of their journey, they received a promising lead. A local fisherman claimed to have spotted some rare sea creatures in a specific ocean part. With renewed determination, Deborah and her crew set course for the coordinates provided, their anticipation building with each passing mile. She didn't even want to know if it was those sharks. When they reached a certain level in the ocean, the acceleration stopped, and Deborah prepared to dive into the water since she probably couldn't have a good view of these sharks from the vessel. Descending into the depths, Deborah was taken aback by the eerie beauty of the underwater landscape. Although she had been underwater several times, the strange rock formations that twisted and turned, and schools of colorful fish darting among the coral reefs with their hypnotic and graceful movements gave Deborah a chill. Deborah didn't dive into the water alone. She went in with one of the crew, and together they navigated through the labyrinth of caves, their excitement mounting with each passing minute. Then suddenly they spotted them, a group of shadowy pictures lurking in the darkness, their sleek form gliding effortlessly through the water. Heart pounding with excitement, Deborah adjusted her camera settings and moved forward to capture images of these elusive sharks. As she focused her lens, a sense of awe washed over her. This was why she had become a photographer, to witness moments of beauty and wonder that few others would ever experience firsthand. When Deborah advanced to capture better photos and videos of the marine life, her fellow crew member, Walhi, was also in the shallow coastal waters. Entranced by the vibrant ocean reefs nearby, Walhi drifted away, thoroughly absorbed in the underwater spectacle. But then, in an instant, everything changed. Without warning, one of the sharks turned and charged towards Deborah with lightning speed. Instinct took over as she darted out of its path, her heart hammering in her chest. Deborah was lucky to have escaped the first attack as the shark's powerful jaws snapped inches from her leg. Panic surged through Deborah as she realized the gravity of her situation. She was not just an observer anymore. She had become the prey in a deadly game of cat and mouse. Desperate for escape, Deborah searched for a way out. But the labyrinthine cave she had entered offered little respite, its twisting passages leading only more profound into the darkness. The time spent inside the cave had an impact on her, and her oxygen began dwindling. When she noticed that, she knew she had no time to waste, and the shark was still on her as well. Drawing on every ounce of courage and determination, Deborah pressed on, her mind racing with possibilities. Then suddenly she spotted it, a narrow crevice in the cave wall, just wide enough for her to squeeze through. Deborah plunged into the narrow opening with the shark hot on her heels, her heart pounding in her ears. The passage was cramped and claustrophobic, the walls closing around her with each passing inch. But she pushed aside her fear, focusing instead on the single-minded goal of survival. As she emerged on the other side, she broke through the surface and removed her oxygen mask, gasping for breath as she gulped in the sweet, life-giving air. But her victory was short-lived. As she looked around, Deborah realized with horror that she was not alone. Another shark, sensing her presence, had gotten close to her on the surface, its dark eyes fixed on her with deadly intent. With nowhere left to run, Deborah knew that she faced a fight for her life. Deborah tried to brace herself for the inevitable confrontation, drawing on her years of diving experience, but the shark gave her no chance as it attacked her almost immediately. Deborah tried to remove the oxygen tank when the shark attacked, so she quickly dodged the shark's attack, her reflexes honed by years of training. And then with a burst of adrenaline-fueled strength, she struck back with the tank. Using the tank as a makeshift weapon, Deborah delivered a series of powerful blows to the shark's vulnerable underbelly. With each strike, she felt a surge of triumph, her fear giving way to a primal sense of exhilaration. However, the shark isn't ready to give up. The shark tried another fatal attack with its jaw opened wide, but Deborah didn't let that get to her. She quickly positioned the tank in its jaw to protect herself, and it worked. The tank got stuck in the shark's jaw, and Deborah utilized the opportunity to escape. As the tension mounted, the other crew members in the water hurried back to the vessel. There, they waited anxiously for Deborah's return. Their concern for her safety was palpable. Some paced restlessly across the deck, unsure of where to begin a search. Relief washed over them when they spotted Deborah in the distance, clutching her camera while wading in the water. They quickly maneuvered the vessel toward her, recognizing that she must be exhausted. They helped her aboard with careful coordination, ensuring her safety and recovery. But even as she basked in her hard-won victory, Deborah knew that her journey was far from over. She still has many adventures to explore. It was a crisp autumn morning in 2011 when Zosha Kamuri, one of the most experienced cave rescue divers in the Florida Keys, received an emergency call that would test the limits of her bravery and skills. A lone spear fisherman, Handon Khalil, had failed to resurface from the treacherous underwater cave system in the marine sanctuary waters off the coast of Key Largo in the upper Florida Keys. Zosha and her team quickly gathered their specialized gear and sped to the remote cave. The cave entrance opened beneath the surface, requiring a complex, staged decompression descent through the narrow lava tube. Visibility was poor, as the cave's waters were thick with planktonic blooms, and silt kicked up from previous diving activity. As Zosha made her way deeper into the lightless labyrinth, she picked up Handon's faint distress signals on her locator equipment. The fisherman had become entangled in his line amid a dense thicket of ancient stalactites and stalagmites in one of the cave's innermost chambers. She could hear his panicked breathing over the communications link as his air supply dwindled critically low. Zosha increased her pace, pulling herself hand over hand along the guideline, her high-powered lamps cutting through the inky void. That's when she saw a massive creature drifting through the shadows ahead. It was quickly 15 feet long and decidedly not the docile reef sharks occasionally spotted within the area. The unmistakable silhouette, elongated snout, and distinct dorsal fin told her it was an adult great white shark. White sharks were scarce in these waters, and Zosha's blood went cold when she realized this alpha predator may have taken up residence inside the cave system, with a trapped human providing the perfect lure. She signaled Handon to cease all movement and went breathlessly still, watching the great white's every twitch. The shark seemed to sense her presence, languidly approaching with methodical precision, its obsidian eyes piercing her. Zosha reached for her shark billy stick, a defensive weapon to drive off an attack if needed. A cloud of silt billowed up as something shifted behind the great white, briefly obscuring its position. Zosha's heart leaped into her throat when it cleared. 2 more sharks had joined the first, swimming in tandem. She was surrounded by a pack of aggressive hunters closing in on her and their prey. Her safety training urged her to abandon the rescue attempt in the face of such extreme peril. But with Handon's fading life signs still registering, her determination kicked in. Shoving her fear aside, Zosha pushed forward towards the entangled fisherman. She had inches to spare as the trio of great whites began circling tighter, swimming figure eights around them. Their pointed snouts and rows of serrated teeth emerged from the gloom, almost close enough to graze her suit. Finally reaching Handon's position, Zosha rapidly untangled the fishing line from the stalagmites and secured him to her safety leash. His tank was nearly depleted from struggling in a futile panic. As the menacing shapes of the great whites drew closer, Zosha decided to activate the emergency heat marker. The searing flash momentarily disoriented the sharks, causing them to flinch and retreat, buying her a precious head start. Not wasting her narrow window of opportunity, Zosha kicked into high gear, using her powerful fins to propel herself and hand and back down the guideline towards the exit as swiftly as possible. The great whites gave furious pursuit, jaws gaping hungrily mere feet behind. She armed her shark billy and prepared for a confrontation. But as they approached the final bottleneck entrance to the caves, the sharks inexplicably broke off their attack, vanishing back into the blackness from which they came. Zosha didn't wait to discover their motivation, continuing and bursting through the surface into the open ocean. Gasping for air, she looked down at Handon, who was already beginning to regain consciousness. Though shaken to her core, Zosha had conquered one of the most extreme tests of her diving career through her bravery, skill, and unwavering commitment to the rescue ethos, trading one life for another no matter what monsters may lurk in the darkness.